Welcome. Thank you for attending today's presentation on digital transformation. I'll be your host today, Lawrence Franzoni. I'm a VP of Data Analytics and the RVP of the Midwest for Svitla Systems. And we're joined today by my friend and colleague, as well as boss, Mark 𝐷𝐚𝐫𝐤, who is Executive Vice President, Chief Revenue Officer for Svitla Systems. He's got over 20 years of experience managing large data transformation projects in numerous corporate clients. He has also had extensive experience leading the digital transformation at TracBone Wireless, where they went from 800 million to over $7 billion while he was the CIO. Mark has extensive experience also in implementing technology and product solutions, application development, package and product integration, ERP systems, and distributed information management systems with companies like IBM, Oracle, S-Base, and HP, and others. I work with Mark on some VC companies, specifically 𝐷𝐚𝐫𝐤 Ventures right now. And we're going to go ahead and jump right in here. First, I suppose I'll tell you a little bit about Svitla Systems, because I think it's a big piece of what we're here for and why we're here. Svitla Systems is a US-based company headquartered in Corte Madera, California, and we have business development offices all over the world, over 10 global locations. We are a female-founded company by Natalia Enon, and we have over 20 years of experience. We have over 1,000 developers. We've completed to date over 2,000 projects. We are one of those companies that works very closely with $500 million to $3 billion clients, helping brick and mortar companies make digital transformations, and utilizing our superb talent and all our developers from around the world. We bring a huge range of experience to the table. That said, I'm going to go ahead and start this off, and Mark, I'm going to let you take it over. So, okay. Digital transformation.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear me. So next slide, Lawrence. So I'll warn you right now, there's a lot of information on the slides. We assume you're going to read the slides, and I don't need to read them to you. But what we're going to do is tell you what our practical experience working with an array of clients was in each of these sort of topics. But the first one is, companies have to compete today. There are disruptors in the market. There's changes in the market. The way Gen Z, millennials want to work or want to buy is different than the way boomers and older people want to buy. And you have to understand how you're going to engage your customer base, your operational components, to go ahead and survive in this market. We see it over and over again. If you go and look at the top 50 companies from 20 years ago, there's only 4 or 5 of those companies are still in the top 50 because markets changed, components changed, they didn't turn on a dime, and they lost those valuations. And one of the things you try to do with digital transformation is to keep yourself relevant and to keep yourself competitive, because there's always somebody else coming up from behind you who wants to take your market share. So companies need to be able to turn on a dime. Today we were meeting with Mike Cunningham. Most of you in the US, you know who UHC is, the big healthcare company. And he was talking about the 800 acquisitions they did over the last 30 years as their stock went from $30 to over $600. And one of the things he talked about was, the majority of their IT spend and work is 85% of it goes to keeping the lights on all the legacy systems and everything that they had to acquire. That as they try to build new, better ways for patient care, patient outcomes, they pretty much have to look at either an acquisition strategy or a disruptive strategy, because so much of their time is invested and so much of internal resources is invested to keeping these current applications up and running. So part of this is going through the strategy of how you help your company go through digital transformation, and what are some of the key points that you as technology professionals or business professionals should be looking at that you can help take advantage. So this example, the first couple slides, is really from a study we did for a bank in Spain of how they were going to become more competitive. They were the number 5 bank at the time. They wanted their goal, corporate strategy goal, was to be the number 2 bank. So after going back and looking at things, they weren't engaging with their customers in the best way. They saw everybody else using different technologies, different digital channels that they were not able to take advantage of. So they did their initial study, and they started realizing, hey, there's a bunch of benefits we can get if we can make this digital pivot. Next slide. So one of the things they did, and we initially did in the strategy sessions with them, is we looked at the key aspects of the bank. What is your ROI? What is your ROE? What is your customer retention? What's your customer profitability? And we started looking for where we could have impacts and what the horizon of those impacts would be. Because again, most of you are familiar with IT spend. You have to have some value that's going to be returned to the business. So if you're going to make an investment, how can I make that investment and keep it at such a level that I can quickly show that I've either increased the return on the investment or return on equity, so that I can go ahead and drive change within my operation? And there's a bunch of levers that we identify that could be used. Efficiency is always a big one, or in the US, we call it productivity. I can do more with less people. So one of the stories is TracFone. TracFone, when I got there, initially when we were $800 million company, only had 600 employees. TracFone, as an $7 billion company, only had 900 employees. So one of our key measures was revenue per employee. The idea being that what we were looking at was, how do we drive revenue without adding headcount? And the idea being that to be competitive against AT&T, Verizon, and all the startups that are out there, we had to drive better returns on what our people were actually doing. And we looked at revenue as one of those key measures of how do we make our people more productive, service more customers without adding headcount. Next slide. So when we go through this, there was a couple different roadmap sessions we used to do. And we've used these roadmaps with a couple other clients. Basically, the first thing you have to identify is, what's your strategy and what's the baseline you're starting from? You have to know where you are to know where you want to go. You have to be bluntly honest. We work with companies, and I've worked with companies in the past that they take on initiatives, but they don't have the internal maturity to actually fulfill those initiatives. They don't have a good project management team. They don't have a true understanding of agile. People want to participate, but they just want to give direction. They don't want to take ownership. So, it's more a pass the buck mentality. You have to understand where you are today and what you're going to try to get to if you're going to be successful. You have to be able to build business cases and understand what those business cases involved. Digital transformation, isn't it just about the technology? It's about continually selling the benefits to the business owners and the participants so that they want to be involved with the initiative. It's easy for people to opt out and say no and not participate. You have to find ways to get them to get excited that this is something that's going to benefit them in the end. Again, anybody who's ever gone through change management, getting somebody to adopt to something new is the hardest thing usually about most successful implementations. It's not normally the technology setup, it's getting people to use the application the way it's meant to be used. And this is why your design and planning sessions on your next stage are the most critical, because you have to have the steering committee, you have to have the business buy-in, you have to have the continual updates or product owner sessions. Why? Because you have to have that continual involvement so that you can have a successful launch. Okay, next slide. So I'll break down the structures a little bit more. First thing is you got to be bluntly honest with your company where you are on the maturity model. For some brick and mortar companies we work with, they've been running the same ERP system, CRM system. They've done some extensions, enhancements to it, and they're comfortable. All the IT guys know how it works. All the functional users know what the system does. They may not like it quite a lot, but they're comfortable. There hasn't been a lot of change. There's not been a lot of aggressive projects. Other companies are a little further along. They've already integrated to the digital presence. The shopping cart is integrated with the category management or product management systems, to the pricing systems, to they can collect data on customers. Other companies are much more sophisticated. They know who their customers are. They're running targeted campaigns based on your involvement. They have digitization of assets across the universe. Usually these are the companies that have also gone to microservices already, and they're empowering and enabling new value propositions for engagement by bringing in third-party solutions into their mix. And then again, there's the leaders. These are the top companies, the top valuations in the market, and what they're able to drive, because they're the leaders and they've already built their structures that they're constantly innovating and launching net new. Next slide. Again, this is just a little bit more detail for you. But again, you can usually take your company profile and sort of say, okay, we check this box, we check this box. The biggest thing we see in the marketplace are everybody to successfully compete. You have to become a digital company or a digital economy leader. Why? Because you have to be able to engage customers continually in this day and market. There's too many distractions out there. You have to have a value proposition. You have to be able to go ahead and deliver on multimedia, social media, YouTube, all the components. And when a customer engages with you, whatever they're trying to do has to work right the first time. You can't have 404 pages come up. I can't have a failure in payment. I can't have not available anymore be a response. So understanding how your ecosystem works from the bottom to the top, and how that engages both from operational efficiency to customer engagement to revenue generation and profitability enhancement, those all become things that you have to take into consideration as you're building your next generation infrastructure to support your digital transformation. Next slide. So again, we sort of take two basic components. So usually when you start the analysis, there's usually two major things that when you're going through talking to your chief marketing officer, chief sales officer, chief operations officer, chief financial officer, CEO, if you get them involved in the initial strategy sessions of what we want to do, there's usually two things that they'll all sort of pop in with. One is going to be customers. Hey, we need customers. Customers is what gives us revenue. What can we do different to satisfy our customers' needs and opportunities that our competitors are either doing or they haven't thought about, and we can be more supportive of our customers. The second one is usually around operations optimization. The idea that I spend a ton of money, how am I getting the most out of that money I spend? Are my employees really as productive as they could be? Do I have internal processes that cause my employees not to be productive as they could be? Are people moving paper from one stack to another stack? Are people re-entering the same data in multiple systems? The joke was, we used to go to meetings at TrackPhone, and the very first thing that would happen is, 3 different people would pull out reports, and they would all have the same KPI, but they all have 3 different numbers. So every meeting we would go to, the first 15, 20 minutes was everybody arguing about whose numbers were correct. And part of that was because we didn't have a standardized way at that point in time of understanding what our numbers were telling us. We didn't have one source of truth. So, we had multiple analysts running around, and in theory, it should have just been one person with correct data being able to source it and report it. Another client we worked for their digital transformation, they did loan securitizations. If you think about a loan securitization, you have a portfolio of 50 to 1,000 mortgages. You are making payments, you're doing payoffs, and then you're calculating the value of those. Average portfolio took a person and a half. These are very high-end guys. One idea was, hey, let's move the back office to India. We can cut our costs there. What they found was it actually took 3, but they had some savings. What we found was if we took all the calculations, all the formulas, the portfolio calculations, cost, and we actually did a lot more on the automation side, that we could actually generate the general ledger entries and do the validation correction and just flag those things that were anomalies. And that was the focus. They were able to go to 8 portfolios per person. And because of that, they became very profitable in that subprime servicing industry. And that was actually that system application became their competitive advantage against everybody else that they compete against in that marketplace. And it actually helped drive their stock up by 300%. There's 3 things that are going to help you enable very, very quickly to get your quick wins. The first one is the cloud. And we can't say this enough, and we'll talk about it on a couple other slides. If at TrackPhone, when I got ready to do something, I had 2 data centers. I had to have 4 times redundancy. So as soon as somebody came up with a great idea and I had to go evaluate it, the very first thing they had to deal with was $1 million in capital for hardware and software and IT services to go ahead and do the networking, cabling, air conditioning, and everything for the data center. Well, that puts a lot of restrictions on applications that may or may not have a good ROI case. In today's world, in the cloud, I'm probably going to ramp that up on an AWS platform or Azure platform, and it's probably going to be initially $10,000, $15,000 for support while I see if this thing is going to scale or not scale. That's one of the competitive advantages. Now I don't have to have this huge ROI case. I can go ahead and show a quick value return potentially on something that could be even more valuable to the company. Innovation model and governance. Again, we'll talk a little bit more in detail, but a lot of companies today still struggle with managing Agile, managing Kanban, the idea of product ownership, because you're moving things from the traditional waterfall approach of, hey, we did all this analysis, we know what we want to build, we took 6 months doing that, and you've already missed the ability to get to market. So, how you're going to create an innovation strategy in your company, how you're going to manage it, how you're going to reward people for making things happen. Those are all critical components. And again, we talked about optimization. Process automation is one of the big things that's out there. Whether it's web enabling through microservices, using tools like UiPath, RPA, Automate Anywhere. The idea is that I can reduce the stress on people and get more value because I can take routine tasks, routine things I have to do, and I can embed either third-party applications or automation within my groups to be able to go ahead and increase my speed and efficiency. Next slide. So real quick, why the cloud? There's so 89%, 90% of the clients I work with are working on cloud-based platform development. Why? Because it's easy to do in the remote world. Everybody can access via the internet the servers that they need to connect to for development purposes. We can share. We have Zoom. We have Skype. We have Slack. In this day and age, if you're looking for the greatest return on investment, especially for something that may be high risk and you're not sure how fast it's going to take off, and you don't want to sink a lot of capital dollars or equity of your company into physical infrastructure, the cloud is the value. Now, again, people will tell you, oh, the cloud's expensive and all that. It's expensive in that you are paying more for the same CPU power that you're using. Where it's cheaper in that you're not paying more for the ability to have the CPUs available to you. So one of the things is, we used to go into companies and we would do analysis of what they needed for their data centers for power and all that. One of the things we would look at is, well, how often are servers really used? Are they running 100% capacity? What we found is most companies' infrastructure, you're running at either between 20 and 30%, which means you have 70% over capacity. And if you're running something that has to be disaster recovery, business continuity, you may be running as low as 10 to 15% of your total capacity of what you've actually purchased. Now, cloud, I can run it at 100%. I can have a failover. I can spin up my environments. I can go serverless. I can spin up as I need them, reduce them as I want to. Those are some of the advantages that you can take to keep your fixed costs low, so you can hit your ROI number. That's why we always encourage our clients to look at the cloud. Next slide. Again, there's a lot of reasons why you can use cloud. There's a number of SaaS platforms, platforms as service, infrastructures as service, number of web services that are available that you can tap into. All those things are things that it can allow you to quickly innovate and build new applications, new functionality, new things to increase your customer engagement. You can sit there and reinvent the wheel, or I can tap into it. Yes, I pay my service cost for using it, but it allows me to get the market quicker. Because if you're going to take a year or 2 years to get the market, somebody else has already beat you to it. And that's what part of this is in your innovation strategy is, as I understand what the company wants to do, not only how do I do it and roadmap it, but how do I do it quickly and how do I do it the most cost efficient? Next slide. So when we look at the enablers, there's 3 levels of strategy that you have to deal with. First of all, what is your corporate goals? What's your corporate strategy? Is it expansion? Is it acquisition? Is it customer engagement? We worked with one client and they were a 10 million health and beauty, $10 million a year health and beauty company. Their corporate strategy was to grow 10 times in the next 3 years. They had a small warehouse. They had a couple guys working the warehouse. They had the head of marketing was responding to people on the website. They had a very, very basic website, sort of giving their product information out. They pack boxes and ship them. They want to grow by 10 times. What are you going to do for a call center? How are customers going to reach you? What are you doing for customer retention? How are you doing these things for credit card payment and having a renewal stream so that I can go ahead and send multiple launches of products? Do I know who my customers are? Do I have a strategy for building in that new customer base? Is there different multi-channels I should be working through for advertising and branding? What am I going to do on my campaign front? What am I going to do for customer service agents? These are all things that, going from a $10 million sort of a startup to becoming a $100 million company, they have to address. And so, taking the corporate strategy down to the next level, which is the innovation strategy of going, okay, hey, we could use this technology, tie it to this, and we can do these things. Well, what is it we're really trying to achieve? Well, we want a high customer retention rate. We want to be able to launch new products to our customer base, but also have a new customer acquisition strategy. We want to increase profitability per customer. So what are all the things we're going to do to gauge our customer base? And then actually taking those ideas from their strategy and actually figuring out what that physical roadmap is and spend is of what it's going to take to execute that. Because as a self-funded startup, they have to go ahead and set it up so that as they incrementally gain business, they know what the next investment is that they have to make to support, so they don't overwhelm themselves, and based on where they were from their starting point. Lawrence, you want to add something there?
I would just add that, oftentimes, I used to work for pretty large companies as well. And, sometimes it's foresight, right? So you had, in one case, I had a process that always worked and it was just fine the way it was, until all of a sudden you wake up one day and the structure of the company changed a little bit. And all of a sudden that process doesn't work and you're forced to innovate. You're forced to step out and look at it from a different spec. And, it's amazing though, once you go through this innovation process. And what we did is implement an IBM BPM process, right? Where we, took this kind of now broken process and rebuilt it, took it apart, rebuilt it, and saved tons of time. And everyone was super happy with the outcome. But it took us that step forward, right? To kind of really embrace the innovation that was there in front of us the whole time. But sometimes it doesn't come upon you until something breaks, and you're like, oh, wow. So it's not just the startups of the world, it's the big companies as well. They're constantly, there's a diligence that has to happen. You guys have to look at things, maybe through different eyes, and then kind of see, well, what can we do to make this investment? Yes, there's a little bit of investment involved, but the outcome was stellar. So I'm just saying, always look.
Okay, next slide. So the next part is sort of let me skip the slide on my own. So again, there's a lot of basic components of what's involved. And one of the things you have to understand is whether you're an incremental or you're going for a disruptive innovation. There's a difference in the approaches between the two. The one is much more geared to the existing IT organization, working with the existing business owners. You try to train them to be a product owner. They then come up with an idea. You're going to run your agile, you're going to run your scrum meetings, and you're going to try to go ahead and deliver something. And it's going to be some type of incremental improvement, usually focused on something that people can touch. Usually these are very meat and potatoes type of initiatives. Disruptive innovation is where you decide that, listen, the only way we're going to compete is we have to basically build our own startup and go ahead and build the technology we want, commercialize it, and basically bring that in-house, but also create something for the marketplace. Most major companies have VC funded arms. And the reason they do is, they understand the stretch of what the CIO can do, what the CTO can do, and they understand the limitations of their internal organizations. And one of the ideas is that, hey, we'll go ahead and work with a VC, we'll fund something, or we'll work with a startup, and we're going to go ahead and launch something that new, but we're going to build it outside our normal framework. That's not very unusual in this market. We're working with one company today, and that's basically what they are. Is they're a startup funded by their parent company, but they're sort of hands off on them because they realize the technology they need to be developed would never get done within the internal organization and any type of framework that would be usable. So, in that type of disruptive strategy, it's critical. It's critical. The upper management already understands it's something that they can't, quote, deliver internally because the focus is more on support of legacy operations, that the only way they're going to be able to achieve this is to go outside the box. And that's what disruptive innovation is. It's going outside the box, the normal channels, and sort of building your own internal startup. And again, you can do it one of two ways. You can use an external entity, that's funded, or you can use an internal entity that's still under control. But again, it's sort of separate from the rest of the business. Okay, next slide. Again, when you look at these different models, there's a couple different ways it can be done. One idea is you use the decentralized model. The idea is that each business unit is sort of going to go work on their own thing. So payroll comes up with their strategy and they're going to go execute something for better workforce management. Hey, we can all clock in our hours by our phone. We can all do our pay. We can do our rollover of vacation. And, they come up with all these things which reduce the amount of manual processing they have to do. If you've ever worked in a union shop or a shop with a lot of hourly billable resources, or where you have multiple work rules because all the work rules are different in every state, you know how intensive that can be. So anything that reduces manpower, again, process optimization, you can have different departments go that route. You could have marketing go a different route. Hey, we want to do these types of customer engagements. We want to launch a lot of vanity sites, be able to do content management across those, because we think our branding, we just don't want people to hit our website. We want to have these vanity sites drive to us. So we're going to come up with a whole strategy to do that, but we can't go hire 100 people to manage those sites. We have to manage it all centrally and be able to reuse ideas across. That's where you're going to see the decentralized models. Each department is sort of running their own digital transformation process. And a coordinated model, you're going to see it go across multiple units. Usually these are going to be transactional based. This is something that goes across. So, it's going to be order management, from customer to order to delivery. And how do I make that a seamless process all the way across? Or I may actually have to bring in my third-party partners. So, you think about UPS. Hey, I go to the local UPS store, I put in mail my box, but I can sit on my phone and track where everything is. So everything in the journey of my package is tracked across the whole organization. That's coordinated across multiple groups within a UPS. And again, a cross-sectional focus is going to be one more where you build your innovation and you're going to sell it to each of the units to get them involved in whatever their side of the component is and what value it brings to them. A lot of times you'll see this with improving employee communication, improving business processes that run across multiple groups. It could be on a BI side or financial reporting or other aspects of the company that are going to run across multiple channels. Next slide. So during your session, your workshop, if you're the leader of the workshop or you're pitching this to your upper management, you have to go through and figure out where the value potentials are. Most CEOs don't want to talk about technology unless you're a technology startup. They want to talk about revenue and cost savings. So everything you're trying to figure out is based on where you're going to be in that whole process. And, there's really three major parts. There's revenue and there's cost and risk reduction. And you have to figure out where those value propositions are. That's why usually the way most of these things kick off, they kick off with a sort of open source meeting. All the stakeholders are there and you start spitballing ideas. Well, this is what's going on. This is what I think is going on. And one of the things that comes out of this first meeting, you start to find out that people have different perspectives of where the problems are. Hey, why did we not grow this year? Well, it's because of these guys. The salespeople couldn't sell. Oh, no, it's because the marketing team didn't do new lead acquisition. Oh, it's because our product is defective and, people don't want to buy it anymore. All those types of things come out in these discussions. And part of what you're trying to drive to is, listen, where do we think the value of our company is? What are the things that we can do to either increase our revenues or reduce our cost exposure or risk? And, part of this is the reason you're going through this is to start coming up with your short list of initiatives, because you have to have that to figure out where would you put $500,000? Where would I put $1 million? And what do I hope to achieve by doing that? Next slide. And the one example we went through, after we did the initial study, these were some of the ones they came up with. Hey, we need a message center. Hey, we need better mobile to cash type of options for our customers. Why? Because our competitor has it, and we don't have a platform that we can stand up to do it because we can't figure out how to get to the core banking system without breaking something else. How can I, just something as simple. One of the things they did not have was I couldn't figure out where the nearest branch was. Off their website. Because they hadn't tied the geocodes together so they could launch their own. Again, all sort of silly examples, but again, these were things they came up with during their brain storming session. Next slide. When you really start to look at it, this is sort of the map that you're going to go through if you're going to be successful. You have to understand your environment and your requirements. That's the first part you're doing. Hey, here's where we are today. Here's where we want to be tomorrow. You got to understand how that transition occurs and what's actually involved in it. Is what's disrupting us and what our constraints are. It's not unusual when I work with, especially with large legacy companies, that one of the biggest components is, especially if you deal in the banking and insurance world. Yeah, we have 5 million lines of COBOL code that none of us know what it does. And we don't even have any COBOL programmers anymore. The thing just runs in the corner. Well, how do I enable that to be an external application that I can leverage if I'm going to do these other things? And different companies have come up with different success measures for it. But if you've ever dealt with a company that has a mainframe, that in a nutshell sort of becomes your problem. Your initial problem is what are my constraints to enabling going digital? And that sort of becomes one of the challenges that you're going to try to address in your process is understanding where those constraint points are. Is it an IT security constraint? Is it an infrastructure constraint? Is it a PII constraint? Is it a HIPAA constraint? There's all these things that are going to bind you in. And the question is, what would I do to address those? Is this sometimes this is why when you go the disruptive route, it's, well, if this is already a product, I would just buy it and implement it, and then it'd be done. So that becomes sort of what you're going to do in your initial understanding what the constraints are, where you want to go, and how you create your own disruptive technology map. The next thing is going to be is, what's the operating model and technology trends that you're trying to solve for? Hey, mobile, most of our customers don't want to go to a branch. They want to do everything off of their mobile device. So, okay, we can reduce our branch costs, but we need to increase our mobile footprint. And we need to put more feature functionality on that mobile footprint. Okay, well, you can do a mobile app, but to do a mobile app successfully, everything on your back end side needs to be service enabled. If it's not service enabled, it's going to be really hard to write a good mobile app. If you're just going to go ahead and cache transactions and just try to screen scrape those transactions into an existing application. Where's the industry going? Okay, every bank is going this route. We have to do that to compete, to hold our customer share, because that's the customer experience they all want. What's going to change in the future? Well, not only do I want to use my bank, I want to talk to my 401k plan. I want to talk to my son's savings plan. I want to look at what's going on with his my son's college account. I want to be able to look at my credit card balances, even though my bank's not my credit issuer. So, single pane of glass for all my financials. Wow, that's something that I've never considered, but how would I go about doing that? These all become things that as you're going through this road mapping and you start looking at feature functionality and cost of implementation of feature functionality, how are you going to go ahead and address this with your product owner to figure out what the best roadmap and feasibility is for your initial situation? And that's then where you start to move to the roadmap. Okay, I understand how to get this done. I know I need to keep my delivery dates incremental and 3 month, 6 month launches, product launches, where I'm delivering X amount of feature functionality at every time. Well, you have to roadmap that out, understand what your constraints are. Again, this is where we usually go back and say, hey, really, really, really consider the cloud, because with those type of tight timelines, hearing from internal IT that, oh, we don't have power, it's going to take us a while to get the servers stacked and racked. You need to already be starting delivering and building your your next application day one. And that's why, the cloud tends to lend itself that way more. Um, and then again, as you're building this next generation, you have to start planning for what your roadmap is. So you're building the hooks for the next application set. So, you may look at it and go, okay, we need to web enable everything. We need to build a microservices API infrastructure. I may not need to do every API that I eventually want to use, but I have to know what the core set is, and then be able to constantly launch new versions and new ones as my base application footprint starts to expand over time. One of the ideas is, you gotta have your crawl, walk, run plan. The idea is, what am I going to do quickly so that I can show value of this initiative and effort, because you want to get as many quick wins as you can, and what am I going to plan on long term? So usually the way it works is you have a 2-3 year roadmap, and then you have an incremental first year of delivery. And then in the middle, you start to do the major milestones for year 2 and year 3 that you're going to try to reach, assuming that you can do the first year delivery. And then again, IT, business, everything changes. How do you protect what you've invested in, and how do you keep it rolling on a go forward basis? Next slide. So these were 2 clients we worked with, just to give you an idea how they approached it. So customer one sort of went the route where they came up with a strategic roadmap. They wanted to look at how they were going to revise their distribution model. The idea was that they wanted to change their customer experience, and they wanted to reduce the servicing costs for the bank. So they went sort of, and this is almost the big bang approach of, okay, we're going to realign these systems. We're going to put in there this basic infrastructure, and we're going to have a corporate strategy. We're only dealing with digital in the future. So every piece of paper that they see, it was a joke, but the CEO would walk around and he would look for people that had paper on their desk. If you had paper on your desk, you got flagged. You got a star. You didn't get a star that day. And the idea is they wanted to enforce top down this complete strategy, digitalization all the way. The other client took a more incremental approach. They tried. They identified what they initially thought would be their most successful, and that was to go into a multi-channel strategy for customer acquisition, customer retention. And so their focus was in building out how they engage customers, building out social media, building out mobile apps, building out hooks to go ahead and try to engage, draw those customers, being able to offer special deals. Hey, sign up now, get 100 pesos, get 100 pesos when you open your account. That was their strategy. They were more about, we need to increase the top line, bottom line numbers of the company before we go work on all this other stuff. And again, that's where, if you've done your strategy working sessions, and and one of the things we didn't talk about, but, steering committees are very, very critical. And you have to get the highest person you can as your project sponsor to agree to be the steering committee chairman, because that is what gives you power to get things done. It's what gives you the ability to have an internal champion to go ahead and drive through some of the clutter, especially if you're working in larger organizations. You got 1,000 members of your organization. You got 40 VPs, SVPs. You got 40 different opinions of ways everybody wants to go. So in that case, you have to have a C-level sponsor. Without a C-level sponsor, you're going to die on the vine. Usually larger companies, you really have to have, almost the CEO or COO or CIO behind these initiatives to go ahead and make. And again, even the CIO, CTO is not as effective as having, the head of customer management, the head of chief service officer, chief marketing officer behind you. Because again, they're the ones that are going to help drive, because they have the KPI that's tied to what you're trying to deliver on. Okay, next slide. So again, customer management, there's ways to do it. Operations management, web enabling infrastructure. Again, usually what we find is IT-led processes tend to be more about changing the internal IT infrastructure. The problem is internal IT projects by themselves never produce an ROI. Business-led projects produce an ROI or ROE. So usually the trick is to get a business process that has a huge potential value, use that to try to leverage up the changes that need to be made within the IT infrastructure. And anybody who's ever done capital spending controls and had to go for budget committees and all that, you know what I'm talking about. Hey, here's the hard ROI projects. Okay, well, we need to do this. And usually the IT guys will come and say, oh, we got to do it for compliance or reduce risk. But if somebody's going to cut something off the capital budget, those are the ones I'm usually cutting, because they're not hard ROI. They're not hard ROE type projects. Companies want to grow, and changing IT by itself doesn't change things. It's the application suites and business processes that could drive those application suites or customer engagement processes that actually drive revenue or customer engagement. Next slide. So if I was getting started, here's what I would do. And this is what I've done for several clients in the past and thing. The first thing is you got to identify your key stakeholders. Who has an interest. So one of the companies we worked with was a global insurance company. They're sort of unique in that they run as 52 separate operating companies. A lot of the US. So one group covers oil and gas. Another group covers British financial institutions. Another one covers shipping lines. Another one actually covers all the car dealers in Germany. So first thing you realize is they're all running on different ERP systems. They all have different claim systems. They all have different underwriting applications. And you're a public US company, and you have to do your quarterly reporting, your monthly reporting. It took them, excuse me, it took them 27 days on average to figure out what their profitability was every month for reporting. Why? Because it took that long to go through all the reports from everybody. Turned out that there were a lot of errors in those reports, because the way that Spain was doing it was different than the way the company that was set up in Maine was doing it. So recovery costs were not being calculated correctly on issuance. So, you have a major company and they're having these types of problems, but again, they're a very successful company. So the idea is they were going to go buy IBM Atomic model for insurance, and then go ahead and implement the IBM Business Suite, reporting intelligence suite, and they would go ahead and be able to build all their reporting and all that to feed into their PeopleSoft financial system. Turned out after $27 million, they realized that none of this was going to work. So we went in after the first failure and a presentation to the CEO. And basically, we walked them through where they probably went wrong and their rollout model and how they were going to tackle it. Because the problem was you had to learn 57 different cultures of each of the operating units. The problem is the finance team had an agenda that they were trying to force onto a bunch of operating units that are run by very high-end insurance sales execs who basically just said, I get paid for what I sell. I get paid for corporate reporting. So what happened is they had a huge sunk investment cost in technology. They needed a way to go ahead and figure out how they could salvage their investment and how they could take this and actually drive changes and the profitability of their clients by being able to have a better understanding of where claims and revenue was coming from. So the idea was that, and the solution we came up with was there was something going on with Brexit at the time called Solvency II, that we could leverage that as something they had to do to go ahead and stand up all the European entities within the Brexit reporting requirements for Solvency II, and that we could go ahead and basically start the cross integrations between all these core ERP claim applications to go ahead and start getting at least a European consolidated value. And we could do that within a 6-month time frame. Once that launched, then they could cookie cutter that out to the other operating units and start the consolidations based on the experience they had from the other set. And that's where, it gets tricky, is the big bang tends to be high risk. So they could have initially just invested $5 million as opposed to having a huge set of shelfware that just sat there because they weren't able to execute the strategy end to end. And again, this is part of going through and figure out what your optimal path is. Okay, next slide. Okay, we got a couple of other quick reference cases. So one client we have is a global technology company, um, you know, and they have to deploy maintenance engineers. So the quick question became is, how can I know when something's going to fail? And how can I get there faster than waiting for a customer call? Since these are power transformers, when they go out, you tend to have people with no power, and you tend to have a bunch of pissed off people calling you. So the idea was to scale for better customer service, better customer engagement, and their customer engagement, because they're selling to other companies, distribution companies. Was the idea that we can go ahead and we can build through IoT, we can build all these monitors, understand current power output, what's running, last maintenance cycle, are we seeing blips, are we seeing drains, and go ahead and build a self-smart service bureau that would allow us to proactively schedule maintenance to reduce the number of outages. So that was what the client got from the ultimate solution of going through this to figure out, how do I reduce my cost of maintenance and how many people I need, and how do I reduce my outages and penalties associated with those outages. Next one. Okay, so one of the things that's going on in the US you're all aware of is the opioid crisis. So there's a client out there that has a drug that helps prevent the amount of opioids that people are giving in surgery. What they were looking for was a creative solution that they could go ahead and bring this up and show the analysis across multiple hospital systems, multiple patients, multiple doctors, the value of using their treatment. So what we basically built for them is we built an ingestion system of multiple hospital systems to understand the different surgeries, demographic types of patients, and be able to understand how to actually map and drive a solution that would actually look at treatments and go, well, this is a high dosage, this is a low dosage, for the same type of patient class. And who are those doctors that are potentially over prescribing opioids? Because again, if you know the stat, if you've been on an opioid for more than 5 days at a certain measure level, you are potentially already hooked on opioids at that point. So this was to help improve patient care, patient outcomes. We work with a lot of self-insured hospital or companies on this. The idea being that, you know, if employees can't get back to work because they're now on painkiller medication, they're going to claim disability. There's a cost to companies that way. So, you know, who are the best doctors we should be referring for certain surgeries? So, you know, it's a whole patient care outcome process that, you know, an individual hospital can't do because they can't see other hospital data. Drug companies can't do because they can't get patient data. But, you know, by creating a disruptive group that could go ahead and do this from a third party perspective, both the hospitals and the drug companies could participate in sort of understanding what the findings are. In fact, I think this team's actually presenting at the AMA conference next month on some of the findings from the studies. Next slide. Thank you for coming and participating. I don't know if we have time for questions, but if there's a couple questions, I'll try to answer them.
Hey, Mark, we're actually right at time today. Maybe what we could do is if there's any questions, you send them through and we'll come back around with an email. That's all right with you.
Okay, that's fine. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it.
That was great. Great job. Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody coming today.
All right. Thank you, everybody.